A new report is highlighting the horrors undocumented women are facing at America's southern border. The New York Times spoke to several women who were victims of human trafficking once they crossed the border.
Many of the women come from Central and South America and are trusting traffickers to get them to the United States safely.
So joining us now is the author of that article, Houston Bureau Chief for the New York Times, Manny Fernandez. Thank you very much for joining us, Manny. It's a great article in that you sort of map out the overall problem, but then you give us the individual stories of these women. You spoke to dozens of women in your report. Describe to us what they told you about their journey once they arrived in the U.S., because I think what is different about Manny's story is he's not just talking about being victims of traffickers in Mexico. Right. He's talking about once they get to the U.S. and they think they're going to be safe, they're still vulnerable.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, that was, if there was any, theme to the story, it's this idea that this is not a problem that happens on foreign soil. This is a problem that happens on the border in Texas and the other border states. And the women, they sort of described this this very surreal and otherworldly, experience that they have, where they are, they are paying a series of coyotes, who are the smugglers. That's the shorthand nickname for the smugglers, the coyotes. And they're paying a series of different coyotes to get them across the border. And some of those coyotes hold up their end of the bargain, and others use their power to basically manipulate the women and to sort of take advantage of them and exploit them. And the idea is, I have power over you, and I'm going to have my way, and this will happen suddenly. It could be, planned for a day or two, and it's happened out in the outdoors of the brush in South Texas, or it happens inside of a stash house in Arizona. It sort of happens in many different ways that these mostly smugglers decide that they want to take advantage of a woman.
The other interesting piece of reporting you have in your story, Manny, is, and I'm going to quote it from here because it's so powerful. When I read this, I was shocked myself. You write, and such attacks don't end at the border. Women have reported being assaulted in immigration detention facilities, and the federal government, over a recent 4-year period, has received more than 4,500 complaints about the sexual abuse of immigrant children at government-funded detention facilities. Tell me more about that.
Yes, I mean, basically, it's sort of the same idea, where some of the men who are in positions of authority, some of the men who wear badges, take advantage of the women as well.
When you say who wear badges, you mean ICE agents as well?
I do, yeah. We're talking ICE agents, we're talking Border Patrol agents, and we're also talking sheriff's deputies and police officers occasionally. When you sort of go down the line of the different men that these women come in contact with, often some of those men take advantage of them and sexually brutalize them. And it doesn't matter sometimes whether these guys have a badge or not. And it doesn't matter if they're in detention or not. It could be out in the brush if an agent comes upon them. These attacks have happened. It could be inside of a detention facility for ICE, inside a Border Patrol holding facility. So in many different ways, they're just sort of being attacked from. It's as if they can't even trust the people in positions of authority once they cross.
Manny, not so long ago, the president brought up this idea of women being trafficked as a reason for justifying, a wall on the border and more investment. And a lot of critics of the president sort of said, I don't know where he's getting all this information from. I don't know where he's getting these numbers from about women being trafficked. And he described women being duct taped in the back of vehicles and stuff like that. But your article does describe stuff like that. I mean, was the president on to something despite what the critics had to say?
In a way, yes. I started working on this story. Actually, it was more than a year. It's been more than a year that I was working on this story. And so, I remember I interviewed one of the women, and she was talking about being tied up and being tied up when she was being raped by some of the men in McAllen, Texas. And then after that interview, it was months later that this whole sort of thing started, where Trump started talking more about this. And so it wasn't a shock to me. I think that some of the way he characterized it, it could be seen as an exaggeration. The duct tape and women being bound, it does not happen every day. It's an extreme version of the rapes that do happen. But it has happened. It's just that it doesn't always happen that way. But I was shocked myself when I'm reading about some of these different court cases and talking to these women that duct tape was used. And the women I did talk to who were duct taped, they were duct taped by a Border Patrol agent in South Texas who was on duty and who kidnapped 3 women and then raped one of them. And they described, having duct tape on their mouths, and so it does happen. But of course, the president doesn't talk about some of these assaults happening from, Border Patrol agents. Obviously, that part of it is not in this rhetoric. And so there's a nuance there that we wanted to highlight.
And you absolutely did in your reporting. Manny Fernandez, you're the bureau chief of the New York Times in Houston. Thank you for sharing this reporting. It's just horrific to know that these individuals are leaving terrible conditions and find themselves in dire straits when they get to the United States. Manny, thank you very much.